the way we've clashed back and forth on this podcast, I think that's actually healthy. I think that's
Yeah,
actually a good thing
yeah,
when it's done in good faith, when it's done uh, to be, to productive ends.
yeah,
Because it sounds like we have slightly different approaches to how to solve the problem, and that's fine. And the thing is like we might disagree, and you might say, "Well, this is why your approach is bad," and I'll be like, "Well, this is why your approach is bad." And the thing is like there doesn't actually have to be an outcome. There doesn't actually have to be an answer. It actually is like an iron sharpens iron mentality. Of
mhm,
you're going to tell me, actually, Greg, we need to be polite first and foremost before we do anything. And I'm saying, no, we actually, do not have to care about offending people. We need to strategically say bold things to kind of get our point across and apply pressure, blah, blah, blah.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Dialogue Over Division. And today I'm with Greg Wycliffe. And we had a little bit of an exchange on X. And so I invited Greg on the podcast so that we could talk about it a little bit more, even though I get constantly critiqued that I'm not dialoguing over division. I'm just trying my very best. So I'm very happy to have Greg with me today and getting forward to getting to know him a little bit more and hear about his concerns, his views, and why he thinks he could challenge me on X. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I am excited to chat about this because I think there's a lot of jumping off points on the sort of Twitter interaction we had.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure we'll get into the actual different political parties and maybe the election, but also I think what I'm probably going to be driving at is sort of the nature of politics and the nature of like how human beings interact with politics, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
Um, Essentially, having to do with division, almost kind of being fundamental to politics. But we can get into all that. But thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure. And I would be really interested in having that discussion too. Almost maybe more so than about these parties, because getting to the root of these problems is something I want to have a discussion about. But can I just hear a little bit more about you? Just off camera, I had an opportunity just to ask you where you're from, but like, can you give me a bit more about who Greg is and why do you even care? Why are you passionate? Why are you taking your time to, have these discussions online? So who
I
are you?
often, I often, I often ask myself that every night in a cold sweat. Why do I care about this? Why am I investing my time and energy into this? Essentially, I saw how biased the mainstream media was in 2018, and I started to care about politics then. I guess before that, maybe I started to pay attention to Justin Trudeau being elected and me thinking, this guy's resume is kind of shoddy. And I saw this sort of American style politics being thrusted upon people on Facebook, where people were just totally vilifying Stephen Harper as if he had killed this refugee child himself on the beach. And it was like very, very alarming to see that. But I actually ran as a PPC candidate in 2019.
Okay.
My professional background is, selling radio ads in the radio market. So I know a little bit about the CRTC and interacting with that. And I also was a business development person for a video production company. And now I kind of do independent consulting and video production. And a part of that is sort of the niche of political content, which I personally do on a personal basis. I do comedy, I do commentary, and sometimes I do reporting in terms of, interviewing people. I think I interviewed over 300 people on camera at the trucker convoy, for example.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, good to know. And I'll just tell everybody we had some serious technical difficulty because of on my end, and I didn't know that was your background. So you must have just been really shaking your head. But
Hey, it happens to the best of us, honestly. People think I'm a computer whiz, but there's other people that are way smarter than me.
yeah.
I just try to make it work. But yeah.
So in 2019, you ran for PPC. That's actually, let's even go back. 2018, you saw mainstream media really, I don't think you said dividing, but kind of misrepresenting things. Obviously, that leads to division. But what is it that you saw in 2018 and what caused you concern from the mainstream media?
It was the Toronto mayoral election with
Okay.
Faith Goldie. Very divisive character. The thing is, you can love her or hate her. You can look at her accusations. Some of them are valid. Some of them may be a little bit exaggerated. But the point is, we live in a democracy. She paid, I think, $20,000 for ads on the radio. And the radio station decided, hey, we're not going to play your ads. Okay. This is a violation of the CRTC rules. I know this because I went to school. I got a
Mhm.
diploma for radio broadcasting at Fanshawe College, and they grilled that into us. Like, do not break the CRTC rules. I worked in the largest market in Canada, the Toronto market, in radio, selling radio ads. And my boss said, do not break the CRTC rules. We might lose our license. Never do that. I saw this happen in a mayoral election campaign. And not only was that shocking, but nobody cared. Nobody
Mm.
even cared about this violation of the CRTC rules. And that, of course, presents the whole question. If none of these CRTC rules mean anything, or if they don't apply now, then why should any of them else apply? It was very clear that like the sort of structures put in place to uphold our democracy, or specifically how the mass media helps facilitate a conversation for democracy, there's fundamental cracks there. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, to kind of add insult to injury, CBC made a statement during this election campaign to say, we love, and it wasn't even an article. It was like this weird PR, double speak from CBC. It said, we love democracy. We love doing the Toronto mayoral debates. That's what we do. But we're not doing one this year. And they kind of have all this fluffy reasons as to why they're not going to have a debate. And just to add kind of a little bit of my background, I went to university as well for media studies. And I learned all about how this open and honest conversation of this debate, that is fundamental. That is kind of like democracy in action. And the CBC is a public organization. And part of the reason why we spend our taxpayer money to support this is to be like the safeguard of democracy. If
Yeah.
these private organizations like CTV and all these other, media platforms, privatized media platforms don't do the job, then the CBC will come swooping into the rescue to facilitate a conversation. And then I see them bailing and saying, actually, we're not going to have an open conversation. And on top of that, once again, no one was talking about this.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, love or hate Faith Goldie, there was record gun crime happening in Toronto at the time. She was the only candidate who was talking about that. And to me, it was like very kind of clear that corruption was afoot. The fact that a very kind of valid viewpoint of wanting to stop crime was getting completely sidelined out of the conversation.
Yeah, I don't know much about that Toronto election or Faith Goldie, the person, so I don't know any of the accusations or concerns. But obviously, you're talking about a topic that so many Canadians are just concerned about and talking about, is what mainstream media is pushing, propagating, and the lies that they're saying, telling Canadians. And, we could condemn them and worry about all of that. But really, I think that they've done a disservice to themselves so badly that they've lost their own credibility and reputation, that in the end, people are turning them off. So I kind of say, they expose themselves. I think it's great that they continue to do so. And it gives people like us a voice and an opportunity to show Canadians what real credibility is, what real information should look like. So it's interesting because I wasn't that involved. I wasn't that familiar with what happened in Toronto, but I'm sure we have examples all over. So that's what you caught on to in 2018. And then shortly thereafter, 2019, you decided to run in the PPC. So tell me about that. What caused you to run and then with the PPC?
Yeah. So around the same time of that election is when Max split off and became the People's Party of Canada. And this, to me, this was something that was interesting. It was provocative. It was, calling this establishment Conservative Party morally and intellectually corrupt. They were calling him Mad Max. He was opposing multiculturalism. This is something that got my attention. And again, it kind of like, it represented a conversation off the plantation. One that's a valid conversation that's off the plantation, like, one that us Canadian citizens are not supposed to talk about. And to me, like that I found very intriguing. And along with that, also, let's not forget, at the end of 2018, because this kind of did radicalize me, they started to subsidize all media. They started to subsidize the news media across the board at the end of 2018.
20?
It was it was right. It was right at the end of 2018. It was like the what was it, the 490 or the $590 million slush fund for news media in Canada, the subsidies. That's when that came about at the end of 2018. But I ran for the PPC. First I started volunteering, and then before I knew it, someone who I really looked up to, who was running as a candidate, they're like, "You got to run as a candidate in this other riding," and I was like, "Okay, sure." But that sort of radicalized me further because I saw, do I say Eva or Eva?
Yeah, Eva.
Eva. Yeah. What I saw, Eva, is the sort of consequences, or sorry, how the propaganda manifests in public life. You know, there might be a kind of throwaway comment by Rosemary Barton of like, well, the PPC, they say that there might be some connections to some far right groups. That manifests at the door as "get out of here, racist." Like it manifests, like it snowballs, and it's almost like this bad game of telephone where things get exaggerated and talked about. And I actually had an 18-year-old volunteer. He spoke fluent Polish, who was helping me knock doors. 18-year-old volunteer getting shouted at on the street by some guy like, twice his size, twice his age. And I had to go over there and be like, "Sir, do you mind? He's a volunteer. He's 18. Like, is there something you'd like to talk about?" And he was just kind of hysterically screaming and kind of backing away. And that's when I realized, okay, this problem of, media bias is actually much uglier than I thought in terms of how it manifests in the real world. And that kind of, once again, kind of showed me how really deep this problem is and how much work there is to be done. So.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point that I try to talk about as much as possible and this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because, or anyone really, but I find that what affects me and what I don't really like is when Canadians are kind of shouting at each other, like you're describing the man at the door with the 18-year-old. That man didn't start the issue, nor did the 18-year-old, nor did you, but you just perfectly explained it. Rosie Barton or somebody else makes a snide comment, leader does it, and that's where I think we should be holding accountability and saying, you are causing this division, this destruction in this country, that Canadians are no longer able to talk to each other. And that's where I always stand up and try to say something as much as possible, because I see a lot of Canadians, and then we could maybe just get into the conversation right now about why we started the discussion. Is I am not a naysayer for PPC, nor like a pro-Conservative Party person. But I get, that's what I get yelled at on Twitter for. Very similar to at the door almost. And I'm trying to say, I think we should all be having these conversations. This is healthy. This is good to have different political parties and political ideology. But I see that a little bit, it happens too much between Canadians, and we're not pointing the finger at the people that started it. So maybe you could help enlighten me there on your thoughts on that, and why, whether we should be doing that a bit more, or whether it makes sense to be going after Canadians with different views or
not. Yeah, so you bring up a good point in terms of, keeping our sort of our energy and our criticism sort of channeled in the right direction. I think that's a good sort of thing to keep in mind. I always say we should be punching towards Ottawa. We should be punching towards the people in power with the levers of power, and to have the institutional power in the media. Because another way to put it is like, if there's someone who is further away from Ottawa, who's maybe in like the further right spheres, or like the PPC, for example, if they have made a mistake or they're doing something that isn't the best, sure, that's worthy of criticism. But it's when people sort of like take that PPC criticism as if it's the main problem, and it's like, well, this is nothing compared to the people of what they're doing in the House of Commons. I'm not trying to ignore the valid criticism towards the PPC. However, in general, we need to stay focused on punching towards Ottawa, and that's where our criticism should be targeted. Now, in terms of this whole, um, culture of division and trying to bring people together and trying to facilitate a conversation, the and conservatives are losing, and they keep losing, and we need to confront how bad the situation really is. And part of that is the fact that the culture on the media, the culture in politics, and how that trickles down into daily life in Canada, we live under this sort of polite, politically correct fascism. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but I say that to make a point. We're not allowed to talk about this. We don't want to say anything that's too controversial here or there, and then nobody talks about it, and then it results in conservatives losing time and time again. And the reason why I criticize, or it can be hard on someone like yourself who says who sees the situation and says, hey, we just need to get along, we just need to be nicer, we just need to be more clever with our messaging. I think of the image of the Liberal supporter flipping people off.
Yeah.
Eva, these people hate us. They hate us. They've been conditioned by the mainstream media to hate us. And you might say, well, we shouldn't hate them back. That doesn't solve anything. And the thing is, we need to correct this by, we're going to have to piss people off to solve this situation. We're going to have to piss these people who are flipping us off and hating us. We're going to need to, receive a lot of condemnation from those people if we want to actually correct the situation. And this is why I criticize Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party a lot. They have the best platform to correct this phenomenon. And unfortunately, they're not. They actually validate this politically correct fascism because they say, actually, no, we can't talk about X, Y, or Z because the CBC might call us names. Now, of course, Poilievre doesn't explicitly say that, but I see it all the time from all the CPC supporters. You'll see this echoed everywhere. They can't talk about X because Rosemary Barton is going to, snicker and say a condemning sort of statement. And it's like, okay, so we've already lost then. If we're not actually, yep.
So, I just want to jump in because I want to be really clear that I'm not just saying let's all get along. So that's not at all my message. But there's two parts to it. One is direct the attention. I love your statement, punching towards Ottawa. Great. So I want to look at power and hold them accountable. The other thing is elevating the conversation. So when I say let's have a discussion, I just see a lot of battles at a low level where everyone just kind of yelling at each other and not advancing the conversation one way or another. So I don't find that helpful. So when I'm saying get along, I think that it's really unfortunate that people in the PPC party and the Conservative Party can't have a more fruitful conversation. And I'm not saying that they have to agree on things, but if they can't have a discussion amongst each other, that's beneficial to the other side. So that's one thing I think that is worth just exploring a little bit more. But before we get into all of that, maybe can you explain to me, what do you believe is conservative? And so we could establish that, because that's something I have been asking so many people, because I think that definition has changed a lot. So let's hear what it is to you.
That's a great question. That is a great question. And I think you're right. I think it has been changing a lot. I think that it's become to mean just being fiscally conservative.
Okay.
It's been come to meaning just caring about economic issues.
Let me take it back a second. When you're saying it's come to mean, you mean that's what the CPC party is advocating right now, fiscally conservative, or no, general Canadians? Because I was asking what you mean conservative means, and then we could talk about what we're seeing in Canada. But what is it that, what makes you passionate about this conservative movement, and why are you involved? What does that mean to you?
So what I think conservative means is that you are conserving what has come before. So you should be trying to conserve the the demographic makeup of the country. You should be trying to conserve the environment. You should be trying to conserve the institutions and the rules as they exist. You should be trying to conserve the, European Christian tradition of the country. You should certainly be trying to conserve the historical monuments and history of the country and all these types of things. And but just to kind of like give it more context to like where most people I would imagine are coming from, it's not just being fiscally conservative. It's also being socially and culturally conservative. That's what I think conservative means. And unfortunately, I think with the Conservative Party, they're kind of changing that to just mean just be fiscally conservative. We've lost on all these social and cultural issues. We're not even going to try. We might occasionally, invoke the name of Sir John A. Macdonald, but that's about it. And like I use the term conservative. I guess I'm more conservative, but these days I'm honestly identifying more as like something like a nationalist or like a patriot. Just because I think that has more kind of oomph to it. I feel like this word conservative is kind of I don't know. I don't think it's as impactful as it might have otherwise been.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And that's why I really try to understand what people mean by it. Because when you actually explained what you thought it meant, to me, it doesn't seem very controversial. It doesn't seem incredibly radical. And that's why I said I think it's just so important to have those foundational discussions, to elevate the conversation, because I think if people start to understand what that means, because I think just like we started this conversation, the media has been great at brainwashing even and really shaping the conversation. So I think a lot of people identify conservative as like kind of regressed people, care only about big business. That's how I grew up understanding the conservative movement parties in Canada. And I don't think that is actually the case and what many conservative people are advocating for. So that's where I hope that people can start elevating their conversation about talking about those things. I think people are looking for that. Like when you said conserving the environment, like it's just hilarious that you're saying that when the progressives often paint conservatives as people that want to destroy the environment. And if we just talked about that a little bit more, it totally exposes the lie, the farce of what they're saying. So that's why I'm all about trying to have these conversations and talk about it.
Yeah, and could I just jump on that real quick? Because you brought up something really important, which is you had this belief that more conservative-minded people are sort of, how did you describe it? Like maybe they're just kind of money grubbing or something, and they lack empathy. That's not what you said exactly, but what was it again?
Progressives paint that picture. Like growing up, that's how I understood the conservatives to be. Big business, and you see it now still. What does things say all the time? The conservatives just want to enrich their friends in big businesses, bad. They don't hate you, they hate people, and that's the image. And I find that conservatives in general are not very good at showing that they actually care. There's some empathy for their community, for their fellow citizens, for the environment. And that message I don't find comes across very well at all on the conservative side of things in Canada.
No, you're absolutely right. And this is where the division comes in. And this is why the Conservative Party is not strong enough. This is why I criticize them all the time, because we are bringing a knife to a gunfight, essentially. And this stuff, what I'm about to say might be offensive, it might be depressing, it might be demoralizing, but this is the truth of politics that people need to understand, especially if you're going to participate in it or try to be effective. And that is, politics thrives on division. Politics thrives on saying, we are not like them. We are separate from that. And the most effective side of the aisle right now in Canada is the left. And what do? Most of them, in one way or another, sometimes they do it in a very polite way. They essentially vilify all right-wing conservative people as lacking empathy. That is a general, you just kind of said it yourself that you experienced this growing up. I certainly saw it growing up. If you talk to the average leftist, sometimes the number one reason they vote left is like, well, I'm not a vile racist. They associate it with being a like vile person who lacks empathy, who doesn't even have a heart. Like, this is not sort of, oh, they don't really like our policies. They think we're evil people. Like, this is such a profoundly, call it divisive. It's something much more, I guess, socially destructive than that. And the thing is, for the conservatives need to understand is we need to change the conversation and fight back. We can't actually say, oh, no, I'm not that. No, I'm not that. No, I'm not that. That comes from a defensive standpoint. And that's actually validating their whole narrative. That's validating their whole frame of the conversation. And when it comes to, what's effective in politics or what works or, like how it works, it's dialectics or it's frameworks. It's kind of the same thing. But this framework, that Trudeau has really established and solidified into the mind of Canadians, we're stuck in it. Conservatives are stuck in it, and they're trying to play within that framework, and that's why we're losing. And that framework is being a racist is the worst possible thing. And that's all we need to think about. Conservatives, instead of saying, no, I'm not racist. I swear I'm not racist. I swear I'm not racist. We need to say, we love our people. We love Canadian people. We need to turn the tap off on mass immigration. Look what's happening on the streets with our homeless and drug addicted. I'm sorry, but we need to prioritize the people who are here. Look what we're doing to our children. They are being indoctrinated in schools. We need to protect them. No, you are the ones who are being unsympathetic. You are the ones who are being evil and bad. We need to completely flip it and say, no, you are bad and you lack empathy for these reasons. And it's going to be controversial. It's going to be divisive, and it's going to take months and months and years to kind of establish and break out of that framework. But in my opinion, that is the conversation that needs to happen. And I criticize Poilievre because he has the biggest platform, the best opportunity to do it. But instead, he remains to be submissive to the Rosemary Bartons of the world, keeping us in this same Trudeau frame.
So I've said quite often that, like under Pierre's comment or Danielle Smith's in Alberta, that you need to fight fire with fire. So you're not getting a disagreement with me on that. Is I think that there is a lot of things that they could be doing with their messaging and responses, and being leaders and coming with principles, and then educating people on what it is they're trying to do, like I was just saying. But a couple things I'm wondering about. So one is, what are your thoughts within Canada? We are a bit, when I think a large portion of Canadians enjoy the nanny state of Canada. So when you're saying these things, do you think that needs to come into mind at all? And then secondly, do you think that the PPC is doing a better job at that messaging that you're talking about?
I'll start with the PPC stuff. I think that there's room for improvement with the PPC and how they approach things. I think that their messaging could certainly be improved. However, they are the most professional platform with the largest group of people who are actually pushing forth the right talking points, and they are disrupting the status quo.
What do you mean professional platform?
So I think of it like ships at sea. Okay, if you want to like move the country in a direction, you need to be on some sort of vessel. Okay, and there's the Conservative Party ship, there's the Liberal Party ship, there's the NDP ship, there's like the CBC ship that's like a battleship. There's also the PPC ship. It's not as big, it's not as extravagant, but it's there, and people are on that ship, and it represents. Okay, this is a safe stance. This is a stance that more Canadians are identifying with. It's okay to think like this. There's a lot of people I can interact with who think this way, and that's what I'm going to do. Like, there's so much utility in the PPC for that reason alone. Oh, you oppose mass immigration. Oh, you're a more socially conservative.
No disagreement with me on that. But when it was just, you said it was the most professional platform, I think, and I just wanted to understand what that meant, like in terms of what it's.
So let me answer your question, or let me answer the question by asking you a question. If you oppose mass immigration, and you think that should be a political issue, and like you want deportations, and you want to completely stop immigration, where do you go? Where do you go to get your that idea? If you oppose transgenderism in schools, where do you go? Who do you talk to? Who do you associate with? Who's your
Oh,
team?
okay. A couple things. Is I'm obviously all about civic engagement, and I think Canadians have really not taken
Poor.
on the
Yeah.
responsibility seriously, and that's a detriment and a downfall to this country. So something like school boards. I don't have kids, unfortunately. It never happened, but if I did, you can guarantee I would be at the school boards. There would be a lot of ruckus, but a lot of parents didn't take that opportunity. So that's an issue in itself. We could talk about, on a federal scale. I haven't really thought this through completely, but is that the appropriate place to be having the school issue, or is that more a provincial and school board level? On immigration, certainly. And I see what you're saying, and your point is, where do you go? Totally. This is about civic engagement, making your voices heard. But and I think it's great to have, and I like when I spoke to Max Bernier, that was exactly it. You need to have somebody to push the boundaries to make things happen. So the CPC understands people are demanding this, So again, no disagreement with me on all of this. But the question is, and you did answer, maybe they're not messaging right. So let's go to practicalities, and we're recording this before the election, and then it's gonna be released after the election. So nothing that we say here is gonna affect anything, not like it probably would anyway. But here are my problems and comments. And again, I'm all about civic engagement and party politics and making things better and more professional in Canada. Do you find it concerning at all that the leader of the PPC can't get a seat in the House of Commons? And I'm comparing that to our friend Elizabeth May. She has one seat. Why isn't that the goal of the PPC? And I didn't realize you were involved for so long, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Shouldn't that be the one and only goal of the PPC first? Get your leader in so he has a voice? Or has the strategy changed since 2019? Or is this the right track that the PPC was going, in your opinion?
You have to work with what you got in politics. And I think those would fall into the category of more valid criticisms of the PPC, because people say, oh, they're splitting the vote, all this. And it's like, well, Max should have a better strategy when it comes to getting PPC candidates in. Like I've heard the strategy of, hey, instead of running a whole bunch of candidates across the country, maybe just focus on key ridings, have 24 candidates plus yourself, and just focus all of your resources there. I think that's a totally valid strategy. And I don't know what the reasoning is there. Maybe they just kind of want to spread the message as much as possible right now. Maybe they realize like actually getting a seat at the moment is difficult because, and they're looking more at the long term, and they just kind of want to try to spread the message as much as, I don't know what they're thinking, but I think that is a valid criticism in terms of like, hey, maybe you guys should just focus on certain ridings, focus your resources and all your energies there just to kind of get a break in the door.
Yeah.
I will say though, did it not take the Green Party like a long time before they even got a seat to begin with? Like, didn't they exist for a long time before May even got a seat?
I think you're right. And I don't know if that's what you were looking up there quickly, but that, I don't know how effective they were with other ones, obviously not. But they got that one seat. And Max Bernier was in the House of Commons. His dad was a member of Parliament. So there was already that opportunity, I think, easier than you or I running for PPC. So there's a little bit of, a question there on why, or at what point do we say, okay, maybe that strategy isn't working. But for example, like, I think it was when we had that exchange, I looked to see in my riding in Edmonton Centre if there was a PPC candidate, and there wasn't. And then there was on the ballot when I went. So is that incredibly professional that like it's just so last minute? And then people were like, you ran for PPC. And I'm like, okay, I don't think people should just be throwing their name in a hat without any plan or strategy or people knowing, because in the end, is that the best way? And I do get totally trying to get out there, but I think that maybe made sense in the first or second election with the PPC, but does that make sense 3 elections in? And that's where, like, I am not, saying PPC don't. I want to see, why can't it get their message out better? Why can't it come across a little bit, maybe I'll just use the word professional because we've been using it so much, because I think there's a bit of lack of professionalism.
I mean, like I said, there's a lot of ways you could criticize the PPC. And some of it would be right. Some of it would be maybe a little bit of an embellishment. I think that, just to throw some stuff back at you, you say you want more civic engagement, right? That's part of solving this problem, correct?
Yeah.
Joining the PPC is one of the for people who are concerned and like-minded. Joining the PPC is actually one of the best ways to get civically engaged. Because if you try to, pardon?
Why the best? One of the best.
Well, if you have a certain ideology, if you have certain ideas about this country, and you're concerned about foreign interference, you're concerned about mass immigration, you're concerned about gender ideology in schools, where do you go? How do you help out? PPC is one of the most accessible groups to get involved and do something. And you might say, why don't they have like an internship program? Why don't they have a better system? Yeah, and that's valid. But the thing is, people have, like myself and many others, they say, you know what? PPC is not perfect, but I can actually get more done. I can get more done with them. I can actually knock doors, invite people into our world, let them know they're not alone, let them know that there are people who think this way. And, people think there's going to be some simple solution to our problems. No, like we are at a low point. Canada right now, Eva, is at a low point in terms of Canadian identity, true nationalism, true sort of, honoring our country. And the PPC are the only people who do it. And yeah, it's not a perfect party. There's a lot of problems. Absolutely. But that doesn't mean we should just throw it out and not try and just kind of fall into the fold with the Conservative Party, who doesn't want to talk about any of these existential issues whatsoever.
I agree. I don't think we should throw it out. And when I wrote my book, Reconnect to Canada, it actually, my toughest part of it was identifying what it means to be Canadian, to be perfectly honest. And I wrote it in there that I don't know what that means right now. So I'm with you on that. I hadn't thought of that, but you said that PPC is the most accessible. So that I appreciate for civic engagement. My question is, though, and I am pretty new to politics as well. And I think lots of people are, due to COVID. But this is the question I have for many people is, were you involved? Like, did you even take time to get involved with, for example, the Conservative Party of Canada? And I'm not saying to you per se, but people in the PPC party, because now that I'm a little bit more involved and I'm a bit more involved provincially as opposed to federally, is even these established parties are not incredibly established or sophisticated. And what I do agree with you on the point that sometimes there are gatekeepers, and that is a problem. But what you need is more people. And so what I'm seeing sometimes is people don't even try. So I think, and there was somebody that was talking in a space once that got quite involved in the Conservative Party. And this person was advocating so hard. They're like, you don't understand. Like, we're pushing the needle all the time here, but there's not that many voices sometimes. So that's the other thing I'm thinking. And that's why I even encourage people to join more than one party. And I don't like the fact that political parties say you can only be part of one. I think that that's not incredibly democratic. And I don't think that encourages civic engagement, especially when people are maybe trying to figure out which party they want to relate to. So let them have an option for a while. And then maybe they'll be like, okay, this is the one I want to like marry myself to a little bit more. But in terms of that, like, I just feel like there's a lot of people that didn't get engaged at all with any of the more established parties. And they said, they're established, they don't want me, wrote them off. And they're like, we need to reinvent the wheel. And I think that does a disservice as well. So any thoughts on that?
I think that these long-standing establishment parties are rotten. I think that not only are they not helping out the country, I think there's a whole system of gatekeeping. It's not just some gatekeepers. There's a whole system of gatekeeping and placation, pacifying, or what I like to call lip service. You know, I'm sure there's hundreds, probably thousands of concerned Canadians who are engaging with the Conservative Party and say, hey, I'm concerned about transgenderism in school. Hey, can we please reduce the immigration numbers? Can we start talking about deportations or what have you? And there's a bunch of higher ups in the Conservative Party, whether locally or federally, saying, yeah, 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 yeah. We'll talk about that soon. Yeah, yeah, no, 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 shh, shh, shh. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Don't worry, don't worry. Yeah, yeah, we totally think like you. Polyev just has to be a total coward on this publicly for an indefinite amount of time. So just sit tight. I'm sure that's happening a lot. And let's look at solving this problem in terms of actually pushing forth the conversation. Because really, when it comes to all of my content, all of what I do, the sort of like heuristic of what I think is effective is, are you disrupting the status quo? Are you upsetting, like the leftist establishment? Are you putting forth a message that is controversial or kind of disrupting the sort of, that liberal Trudeau frame that I brought up earlier? If you're not doing that, then I don't know how effective you're being. You're kind of just playing in this same frame and it's not really going anywhere. But to bring it back to the different political parties, what do you think is going to be more effective, Eva? Let's say you have like 50 people who all want Polyev to start talking about transgenderism in schools. Okay. You go to the CPC meeting, you go to the local riding, you try to bring this forth. Do you really think you're going to get anywhere? It's like filling in like a complaint box and like saying, okay, everyone put down a complaint, put it in the box, and like hopefully it'll get addressed. Whereas if these same 50 people go to the PPC and start saying, screw the Conservative Party, I'm at the PPC now because they wouldn't talk about XYZ, that does more damage. That is more of a threat to the Conservative Party. And then the Conservative Party will be forced to pivot and actually adjust to that. And we've already seen this. We've already seen this on, a popular talking point is defund the CBC. This is something Bernier was saying years earlier. I'm sure there's other examples, but, it's actually more effective to go with the PPC proudly, making a bunch of noise and demanding higher standards of the Conservative Party. Because when you do that, when you vocalize that way, when you civically engage that way, it forces them to react and pivot and say, okay, maybe we actually should start sounding and acting more conservative. So I just think that when you go to the further right and support the further right thing, that threatens the conservatives more, and that causes them to actually shift rightward.
So in response to your question about 50 people being more effective via the Conservative Party versus PPC, depends would be my answer. I think if it was done strategically and organized, I think that 50 people in the Conservative Party could make a difference. But then again, maybe I'm being naive about it.
Why haven't we seen anything like that happen then? Surely there'd be enough people within the party who would want to push for that, no?
I don't know, because this is the one thing with Canada too. It's so big. So when you're saying 50 people, are those 50 people out of Alberta, or are they in Ottawa? Because there's going to be different administrative positions and all of that. But for the board, if it was 50 people that had the views of like what you're saying, that all took over the Conservative Party board federally, then wouldn't that by default push it the same way as you're saying with the PPC? But sure. I just don't think, from what I've seen in the last 5 years, that conservatives are particularly organized and strategic sometimes. So I think there might have been missed opportunity, at least.
I think what you're seeing as not as organized and not as strategic is more so just a feature of them not really caring what conservatives have to say. I mean, let's just cut to the chase here. Do you think members of the Conservative Party could be guilty? I'm not saying they are, but do you think it's a possibility that they're guilty of foreign interference?
Possibly. Yeah, it looks there's some issues there.
Right. So on top of that, when you become a candidate, if I'm not mistaken, you have to like sign your life away in terms of like, there's so many issues that you are not allowed to talk about as a Conservative Party candidate.
Well, but this is what I'm saying. Those are the established rules. So if 50 people like organize themselves to get to the highest position, because it is still a grassroots party involved.
Wait, what?
Well, I mean, like it is a democratic party. That's what I mean.
Nah, see,
And that people have to be elected for the board, right?
So I think this is another kind of harsh truthism about politics. You might not like it. You might find it depressing. These parties are run like fascist dictatorships. We kind of saw that with how Carney was elected. You know, there's a lot of contention around even Andrew Scheer winning over Maxime Bernier. We'd like to believe that it's a perfect, democratic system within these parties. I'm sure if you actually looked under the hood and actually saw the play-by-play, the way that money is flowing here or there, the way that influence is flowing here or there, you'd probably see that it's not as democratic as you think within these parties. And I think it was kind of a lot more obvious with the Liberal Party, where they kicked out Ruby Dalla, the only person who was talking about deportations, two of them. Yeah. So it's like these democratic parties are probably run a lot more like fascist dictatorships. They're not sort of this sort of nice little thing. And the sort of truism, the harsh political truism, I think in general, in a nutshell, is power is not just given away. They don't just hand out power oh, you want more influence? You want to be able to control the Conservative Party? Here, you can control it now. That doesn't happen. Even if it's like a big group of people, it needs to be a large enough group of people. But the point is like, if you have authority within the Conservative Party, you're not just going to give that away to some person concerned about transgenderism. And because the party is so big, you definitely don't just, give power away like that. And I'm trying to think of like other examples of this, because people just think, hey, can't we just like show up and they'll listen to us? And it's like, people don't just like hand out power. Like it's something that's like hard fought, and it happens with these sort of, you need your own battleship to challenge the power. You can't just like kind of get on the ship and try to take the wheel, right?
Organized and strategic. That's exactly what I'm saying. But I think a lot of times Canadians just feel like they are owed this, and I should show up and I should have this, where there were people maybe with bad intentions getting involved and have been around and put in the time and then got up. But now Canadians are paying more attention now. So I think that, like, at least you see it, I think in Alberta, there's so many more people involved provincially. And the AGM on the provincial UCP party had, I think, 6,000 people at the last AGM. They're thinking it's going to be 8,000. Before, it used to be like not even 1,000, I think. So people are just getting more engaged. And I think that there's an opportunity to get involved that way. Again, I'm not saying the PPC shouldn't exist, never saying that. But I just feel like there's an opportunity that's missed sometimes. Had a couple more points, obviously, but one just I lost.
Yeah, that's okay. If you want, I mean, we could go into that tweet if you wanted a little bit, because there was something that.
Oh, right. This was the one thing too. Sure. and then I think this goes to it as well.
Yep.
Is in another conversation I had with a PPC member. Mm-hmm. They had kind of suggested that I felt like Pierre was the hero of Canada, and that was my position. One thing, even though, again, I'm all about getting Canadians educated and involved, I don't think anybody is out there to save the day on my behalf. And I know I need to advocate for my interests, and I try to encourage people to advocate for theirs as much as possible as well. So I don't feel like anyone's my hero. But sometimes I do feel that is how the PPC thinks that it doesn't have any of these problems that every other party does. So maybe because it's new, it still doesn't have a lot of these issues. But do you think that that's the case? Is like the PPC is never going to have these gatekeepers and these rules, and it's going to be, a lovely democratic party that will never have issues like all the other bad parties in Canada?
First of all, this PPC member you were talking to, is this someone who you know in real life, or is this some sort of Twitter interaction?
I have met this person before,
Okay,
and I was
okay.
like, okay, that's a bit much.
Yeah, and I feel like this touches on another harsh political truism, which
Mhm.
is people will criticize Trump, people will criticize Trudeau, and they'll say, "Man, it's this cult of personality. These people are like cult members. It's disgusting. I can't believe it." It's super effective, actually, and it's what moves nations. You know, like the Trump cult moved the nation in 2016. The Trudeau cult, for better or for worse, moved the nation. And so I find there's this sort of, especially among libertarians and right wing people who follow politics, there's almost like this naivety to politics where it's like, yeah, it's kind of gross, it's kind of disgusting the way that people are kind of like cultish or sort of like worship these people, but it's actually a good thing. Like it's like it not, maybe I shouldn't say a good thing, but it's it's certainly like a phenomena of when you are pushing effective politics. You kind of want people to be super loyal to you. You want people to absolutely love you and support you. You want people out there waving the flag. Oh my God, they're hypocrites. Oh my God, like they're not looking at the mistakes. It's like they're trying to win. They're trying to win, and it's like that's something that the conservatives are, or like right wing people in general, suck at. They're not good at winning. And like this is going to get released after the election. We'll see if Polyev wins or not.
Mhm.
But I feel like, a lot of right wing people discount the the importance of the psychological aspect of politics. The psychological aspect of politics. A lot of people are like, no, 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 better policies and saving money, balancing the budget. And of course, all that stuff is important. But guess what? Mark Carney said, hey, I'm with Mike Myers. You remember Mike Myers, right? I'm also very confident, and I'm going to say elbows up. Like, a few simple things. He's popular. He's attractive. He has Mike Myers there. He's speaking to like something that is nothing to do with the budget, nothing to do with policy, but it's resonating with people because it's kind of speaking to the lowest common denominator. You can hate that. You can say it's horrible. You can say it's awful.
Isn't that what the CPC is doing and what you're criticizing the Conservative Party of all the time? Because they're speaking to the people the way that they can understand it and in an easy way. So it's a bit cultish, axe the tax, bring it home, and everyone gets to participate. So if it's effective for the Liberal Party, why wouldn't the Conservative Party take that on?
Because they're not doing it in a conservative way, and they're just doing it within a liberal framework. I do agree. Like, although I criticize Polyev all day long, and I appreciate you clocking me on that, and sure, they are kind of trying to play to the lowest common denominator. But the thing is, it's a fake conservatism. It's not even a real right wing thing. It's just a different version of being liberal. Because you're right, they are good with the phrases. They are good with the catchphrases, and like the making Trudeau look bad, like that aspect they were fairly good at, but they're still in the liberal frame. They're still in that liberal frame I was talking
With
about.
policy.
No, not with policy, with like rhetoric,
Okay.
and how they sort of weaponize their morality. Okay. And there was such an opportunity, Eva, to change the conversation in this country, and Polyev did not take this opportunity, and he kept us. So the reason why I kind of have a chip on my shoulder when it comes to criticizing Polyev next to Carney is because I made a tweet in 2023, and I
Yeah.
said, if Carney becomes leader, then Polyev's whole shtick of just like basic fiscal conservatism and like not liking Trudeau, that's going to become irrelevant overnight. And that's exactly what happened. And the reason why, that tweet is in the context of me criticizing Polyev for not being strong enough on so many different reasons. Think about it this way. Again, we're stuck in this frame of, oh my God, don't be racist. Like that's the whole like political moral frame that so many Canadians are in. Then a gift from above. The trucker convoy happens, and Trudeau, the liberal, crushes peaceful protesters with horses who were advocating for bodily autonomy. I would love for you or anyone watching to look for the clips of Polyev truly condemning this with the harshest possible words. You cannot find that many. You can find some, but he's actually said, yes, it was a protest about the cost of living and people just didn't like Trudeau. Like, he could have switched the moral conversation here and said, he is Trudeau the tyrant, Trudeau the tyrant, Trudeau the tyrant. He wouldn't be wrong. But then people say, but the media, Rosemary Barton would let's start attacking the credibility of the media too in this country. That's what's already happened in the States with the fake news. But instead we got this very sort of pacifying, placating, let's play it safe. Let's not condemn Trudeau for being a tyrant. Let's not be too aggressive with that rhetoric. No, let's just axe the tax. Are you kidding me? This is such weakness. This is such cowardice. And if the roles were reversed, oh my gosh. Yeah, my gosh. Liberals would be out in the street asking for the head of the Conservative leader for being a tyrant. And we're just supposed to accept this sort of weakness and poor strategy from the Conservatives.
Do you actually think I would disagree with you? I was there. I was called a racist and all of the worst things for representing the some of the people that were at the Freedom Convoy protest. Fellow lawyers condemned me for doing this, for acting for racists and for these extremists and these people looking to overthrow the government. What kind of lawyer are you? I took bullets, I took arrows from people in Canada because that the Conservative government didn't stand up. I totally am with you. You don't need to make those arguments with me. I very much am with you on that. But how is it you won't have a disagreement with me on that. So I'm with you. But what happened with the Conservative Party is they lost, the leader changed. So does that factor into your analysis at all?
Well, when Poilievre came to power in the Conservative Party?
Yeah, because that was right after, during the convoy.
During/after is when he became the leader. Yeah.
But Eric O'Toole,
sure.
Irrelevant fellow, because he was so bad. So then, is that not a success at all? Question. Not like looking to instigate.
So sure. Poilievre is an improvement on Aaron O'Toole. Sure. But the thing is, like, the criticism still belongs to Poilievre and this Conservative Party. Okay, because what I'm saying is that the table was set. The table was set for Poilievre to condemn Trudeau in the strongest possible terms, to say you're a disgrace to democracy. But instead, we got a diplomat from Germany called Christine Anderson saying Trudeau's a disgrace to democracy, beating him to the punch.
I was there with her, and I was again painted as a racist because I stood next to her. So you're not going to get any disagreements with me on that. And I'm with you. And I don't think that was the right thing.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Why should we not be condemning Poilievre en masse for being silent on this, or for not being much, much more aggressive on this?
Couple things is who is doing it to the Conservative Party.
Who's doing what to the Conservative Party?
Who is condemning the Conservative Party for not taking a bigger stance? And is that an issue that is going to move? I personally was affected. I get it. But do enough people in Canada care? That's the question.
Well, if no one speaks up about it, then no one is going to care.
But I am speaking up about it, and you are speaking up about it. So it's
sure,
not like
but this excuse, like, we've been fed this excuse.
Not an excuse. My thing is, do Canadians care? I just told you, other lawyers said, Eva, how dare you represent these insurrectionists? Is that what Canadians think, or is it what we're thinking?
Well, this is a great.
Are you the one off?
Well, but this is a great example of the whole problem with the media too. Well, Greg, they're going to call me racist. Okay. Are you going to correct them? Those people were insurrectionists. Okay. Are you going to correct them? Are we going to, push forth our ideas and correct them? Because you could even say for the people who are protesting vaccine mandates, oh, geez, what if nobody cares? I don't care if they care or not. I care. I want my freedom back. That's why I'm protesting. And it's the same thing.
I'm advocating all those things. But when I'm challenged or like put down or shamed by PPC. I'm with you on all of this. I'm suing the government for these things. And yet, Eva, how dare you say that? Eva, who are you? And I'm just like, are you serious right now? Not to you, obviously, Greg, because here we're having a conversation, but that's where something is being lost, I feel, because like I shouldn't be like having to stand up for myself. It should be like, this is the voice that I'm trying to contribute to. How can we maybe elevate the voice instead of shaming and putting it down or saying you're not doing good enough? If we have the same ultimate goal, like how can we not work together is the question. What is the missing link here? Because with all these things you're saying, I'm with you. I agree with you. Mandates bad. Vaccine mandates bad. I'm literally suing the federal and provincial government for vaccine harms. And we're showing, I think our claim is very strong, showing that the government coerced. Nobody is talking about this, Greg, though. Nobody wants to talk about this.
Have you tried to lobby the Conservative Party to get them to talk about this?
Well, so I'm in a little bit of a strange position because I'm literally suing them. So I don't think I should be, number one, I'm not a lobbyist, but I am trying to get involved.
Sure, advocating, yeah.
Elevate the conversation. But this is where I think maybe sometimes we miss the boat. And it was somebody in Alberta that I was speaking to. She ran provincially and she was going around talking to, and it was rural Alberta of all places. So, pretty conservative mindset. And she said, as she was knocking on the doors, all these people, she was like, what about the mandates and COVID and all this stuff? And she's like, people didn't want to talk about it. And I'm like, so then isn't that your answer? And I'm not trying to say, let's not talk about these things, but we have to understand if we're doing a good job and if we could get our message across better. Because something seems to be missing. Yeah, there shouldn't be coercive mandates, but if we're not able to make that message clear and Poilievre can say, yeah, I'm like with you people on the coercive mandate should never be a thing ever again. But if we can't get that message across, we're failing something somewhere, it seems.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really understand what you're getting at here. You're kind of saying like why advocate for why advocate for bodily autonomy if the general public doesn't care, or
No, because of course advocate for bodily autonomy, but I don't think people understand what I'm advocating for. Because I don't think the majority of the people are on board. They don't understand what it is we're advocating. If you say bodily autonomy, but is that what you're saying? Or you're saying a vaccine harms or injuries? So that's where I think there's a little bit of a message, because I think like I'm with you with the policy objectives. But for some reason, even coming into this conversation, I think you thought, I wasn't aligned with you on some of these things because you were making an argument for like how Pierre Poilievre should have stood up better with you.
It's what I said earlier. I'm punching towards Ottawa. Poilievre has the platform. Poilievre has the megaphone. He is the best positioned to criticize Justin Trudeau for his tyrannical actions. And quite frankly, I think he kind of let him get away with it for the most part by focusing on, axe the tax, for example. Another easy slam dunk is talking about the transgenderism in schools. You can find like 5 clips of him sort of pushing back against this and saying, oh, maybe women should have their own spaces. There's just so much more to be desired from this man who is supposed to be fighting for us. And I find it so ironic because you'll see Conservative Party supporters, influencers carrying water, fighting for Poilievre, no, Poilievre is going to do, like, he's going to be the best. He's going to be the best. And then it's like, what does Poilievre do when he's on the podium? He's not even fighting for you as hard as he possibly could. Like we're fighting for Poilievre, but then Poilievre is not really fighting that hard for us. My whole point to concerned Canadians, because I know there's a lot, and I probably should have clarified. I'm not saying that like you're not with me when it comes to the vaccine thing. My kind of animosity there, again, punching towards Ottawa. I'm punching towards the people who have more influence and power. In this case, it's the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, who had an opportunity to change the moral conversation of like, hey, I don't care if you think I'm racist. Unvaccinated Canadians should have rights and should be able to leave the country, actually. And you're a tyrant because you're not allowing that. Like, that opportunity was missed. And in a way, you are correct that it is sort of too late to bring that topic up now. Like, it's not really part of the conversation anymore. It'd be difficult to kind of insert it, but people should not forget about it. And it should continue to animate them, and quite frankly, of what this true character of the Conservative Party is. But I do think we need to distinguish the difference between like a harsh criticism and yelling, because like the best way to put it is this: when Trudeau said, do we even tolerate these people? You know, they don't even believe in science. These unvaccinated people are misogynistic, all this stuff. He was very polite when he said it. He was very professional and polite when he dehumanized and dismissed a portion of the Canadian population. He was very polite when he did it. You know, he was trying not to be divisive, even though what he was saying had like these horrible moral implications. So I do agree with you that when people are shouting, when people are kind of being, overly aggressive or harsh, you're not going to win as many hearts and minds over. That being said, when someone is making a criticism that's valid, I'm always paying attention to when it's a valid criticism, and again, the waters get muddied, and it's like, oh no, you're just some like angry person, and it's like, no, you're actually just ignoring a valid criticism now. I'm not saying that you're doing this, but this is something that is important to kind of differentiate between. And to add to that, yeah, I think that there is a lot of hurt, there's a lot of resentment, and from that hatred that comes from especially people who have been wronged since the convoy.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, but we need to get over that. We need to get over that, realize that we are in the right, and start to, slowly but surely win hearts and minds.
Yeah.
But the thing that like I'm very, very fixated on is, as I said earlier, it's like, if we're not disrupting the status quo, then I don't think we're really moving the ball. And I think that criticizing the Conservative Party for not being conservative, like that's where everything starts. Like listening to this lip service that they're actually going to be conservative someday once they get elected, I think that's silly. And I think that breaking out of that liberal frame is the problem. And if Poilievre lost, then that's what needs to happen. Like the last thing I want to see is Poilievre losing and then, no, actually it was the PPC's fault. Actually, it was the only people sticking to their principles and talking about conservatives' things fault. The only people who actually had the bravery to stick to their convictions, it's their fault. No, I think it's the Conservative Party's fault for not actually being conservative.
Okay, so a couple of things. Are you running this time?
No.
Why?
I got other things going on. I'm making a documentary right now. I just don't have the bandwidth to do that. Yeah.
Okay, and I usually have a timer, so I have no idea how long we've been going.
An hour 15.
Ooh, and it got heated. So this is the other thing. Like you said, it's the people at the PPC party that are sticking to their convictions and that, but I'm sticking to mine. And why does it do I have to feel like I've done something wrong and that only the PPC is the righteous one? Like, I don't think that's fair.
So I'm sorry for laughing, but I feel like this phenomenon happens a lot with people in conversations like us, which is we almost give the Twitter trolls like too much airplay, not even just on a podcast, but like in our own minds. You know, it's like you need to have thick skin if you're going to be in the world of politics. People are always going to criticize you. People are always going to hate you, especially if you're being effective, actually, especially if you have a platform, because, people, there'll be a-holes like me saying like, why don't you use your platform to do this? But it's really important for people like us to learn how to kind of, like I said earlier, sift through the valid criticisms and feedback and kind of just like the noise and the kind of just like people just kind of being crappy and hateful. That's kind of an ongoing thing that needs to happen. And like, I do feel like there's people will take like the tweets of PPC trolls and say, oh my God, like the PPC is so unprofessional. And it's like, guys, like it's a Twitter comment. Okay. Like let's sort of like focus on the goal here.
Like, so that's not my criticism, because it's on all levels. And to me, childish, and I think we could do so much better. But it's like this is the thing that, and maybe we could wrap up on this and you could tell me your thoughts.
Sure.
The PPC, like I said before, is they kind of say, well, Pierre's not going to do anything, he's not the leader that we need, and he's not good enough, and that's a corrupt party, and we are the PPC and Max Bernier are the righteous ones. So is that fair that PPC and Max Bernier are righteous and everybody else is corrupted and bad?
No, of course not. That's just like another dialectic, right? It's the same dialectic of if you don't vote for Trudeau Liberals or if you don't vote for Carney, then you love America and you support MAGA. It's like another sort of unfair dialectic. And I guess my whole point, which speaks to like the thesis of your show, it's like division is fundamental to politics. It truly is. Like it's in any sort of debate. Like if you have a conversation or disagreement, you're divided, and you need to kind of like play it out and argue it. And I think that instead of rejecting division, it's like we kind of need to figure out where we want to make divisions. We should make a division here against the Liberals. And I think that a great place to start is with challenging the mainstream media and challenging like the sort of tenets of like things we're not allowed to say. It's like, we need to start saying, you know what? No, like we need to stop giving into that. We need to stop being silent, because as you said earlier, like your friends think you're insurrectionists and all this stuff. That's only going to be corrected when we have brave people challenging the authority in the media. And when I get emotional like this, I'm not like trying to say it's your fault, you're not doing enough. I'm saying this to try and instill and encourage people to get their courage out there, because that's really what it's going to take. And don't get me wrong, the vote splitting argument, obviously it makes sense. However, I think the problems are so profoundly deep in this country right now that it's about encouraging Canadians to just be more brave and get more civically engaged, period. I don't think all of our problems are going to be solved in this election, not by a long shot. And, I've been tracking Bill C-63. It's terrifying that Carney has basically alluded to, reviving it and trying to bring it back. However, when I was researching Bill C-63, there's also the Conservative Party saying, we already have hate speech laws, we should be enforcing those. And they also have presented their own version of the Online Harms Act, which would connect criminal harassment to Twitter comments. So it's like there's actually a basket of problems with the Conservative Party in terms of threatening or sort of alluding to policing the internet and speech in their own way. And but yeah, that was kind of a little tangent at the end there. But
no, I think we're kind of like it's couple things coming out of that. When I say dialogue over division, I don't mean, I'm not naive enough to think that we're not going to have any division. And literally, I'm a lawyer, so that's the difference is that you argue two different points or two different things, but you do it respectfully. Like for me, it's how can we not have these conversations in Canada? And that to me is shameful. And that's what I'm trying to bridge. Of course, let's have these heated debates and get our heart rate up, but let's not silence and shame each other. And that's what I see happening. And that I don't agree with.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
I'll just add one point to that. Did you know that a study's been done that during a text message conversation between two people, it's more likely to devolve into an argument? Did you know this?
I didn't see the research, but I've heard this many times. 100%.
Yeah. Anyway, that
your family or friends, it's like, what did you say?
Yeah. And that obviously relates to Twitter. It kind of brings out the worst in people. Oh, what, they're trying to say this about me, and then they go back and forth. And just to kind of come clean, what triggered me so much about your tweet initially, I don't have to bring it up, but essentially you said, where is it?
Yeah, and maybe read it in context if you're going to read it, because it was
whether it's the Make Canada Great Again being too Trumpy, the Freedom Convoy too fringe, the PPC too conspiratorial, or the left too colorful, every Canadian, regardless of their views, should feel welcome to participate in our democratic processes, period.
And that was about, in reference to, at a Conservative rally, somebody was asked to leave because they wore a MAGA hat. So that was obviously a criticism of telling somebody to leave from a Conservative rally.
Mm-hmm. And so this triggered me for two reasons.
You have a microaggression? Was it?
Yeah. and like, just so you know, so we can talk this out and you can understand where I'm coming from. Number one, to me, it wasn't tough enough on the Conservative Party. Like, because, it's a general statement of like, hey, we should be able to do it, and that's fine. But for me, and this is what I'm always pushing for, is like, no, you got to punch harder towards the Conservatives. Like, like this should be, hey, I thought you believe in free speech, Polyev. What the heck? Make Canada great again. Something like that. And that's I'm kind of a broken record when it comes to that. Like, hey, we need to be more critical of Polyev. But number two, you said whether the PPC too conspiratorial or the left too colorful. And it's like, Eva, would you rather be called colorful or conspiratorial on CBC News, let's say?
Well, probably neither, but
no, but yeah, you have to choose. You have to choose one.
I guess colorful, I would prefer.
Right. And that was my whole point, because it's like calling the left too colorful. It's like
what did you want me to say? It was a quick tweet and I was using one word descriptions. I could have gone.
They're preying upon children, the left. They're traitors, Traitor. Right. But here's my thing. I also found it ironic because you're like, hey, we need to welcome everybody, even if the PPC people are like conspiracy theorists or whatever. Like, it felt like a backhanded sort of thing.
That wasn't the thing. It's how people are labeling the PPC. And then I saw somebody comment on it. She has a point because it's letting everyone in, even these. And like, I might agree with some of those things, but it's just how it's coming across. And it's like you're shooting your own people sometimes. But the reason too, I wasn't as maybe forceful on that one is because I was actually at the PPC rally in Edmonton, or the Conservative rally in Edmonton, where there were like possibly 15,000 people. And there were no rules. Like, there was nobody checking anything, like even checking your name at the door, because I don't think they could have managed that anyway. So that's why, to me, I said it, but it almost, like, compared to my experience that I had, nobody was looking at what people were wearing, and people were standing wherever they wanted. There were literally no rules. And I really love that it was like organized chaos. And that was the way I described the Freedom Convoy too. It was organized chaos. So that was it. It didn't really make sense to me, but I did want to say something about it, because I have a problem, and I'm with you, Greg. Maybe we could end on this, or we're just going to keep going on for 3 hours. Is, for me, the biggest disappointment with the Conservative Party, and I'm sure I've said this many times with Pierre Poilievre, is he didn't stand up for Canadian citizens that went to Ottawa to engage with their elected officials, myself included. So I am with you on all of that. And I'm trying to be the most effective in how I'm doing it. And I think that we all have, there's many ways to be effective, but I just don't get why we can't be better at it, maybe together sometimes.
Yeah, no, and that's a beautiful sentiment, and I totally support you. And I actually think that the way we've clashed back and forth on this podcast, I think that's actually healthy. I think that's actually a good thing when it's done in good faith, when it's done to be, to productive ends, because it sounds like we have slightly different approaches to how to solve the problem, and that's fine. And the thing is like, we might disagree, and you might say, well, this is why your approach is bad, and I'll be like, well, this is why your approach is bad. And the thing is like, there doesn't actually have to be an outcome. There doesn't actually have to be an answer. It actually is like an iron sharpens iron mentality. If you're going to tell me, actually, Greg, we need to be polite first and foremost before we do anything. And I'm saying, no, we actually, do not have to care about offending people. We need to strategically say bold things to kind of get our point across and apply pressure, blah, blah, blah. But I totally advocate for more conversations like this. And the thing is, like, you have to be careful, because the gatekeeping thing does happen. It is real. And, we won't open this can of worms, but I'll just say, since October 7th, a couple of years ago, I've been blocked by Ezra Levant. I've been blocked by the official Rebel News account. I've been blocked by Gad Sad. I've been blocked by Dave Rubin. And this is just for, like, straight up questions, straight up pointing out hypocrisies. And it's like that's kind of a gatekeeping effect that's happened, which I find very discouraging, because it's like, we won't get into a whole foreign war thing here, but it's like, I feel like we should be able to have different sides of the conversation be heard there instead of
Yeah.
just kind of like shutting people out for not being pro-Israel enough.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I don't think that we can, but again, we're running longer, which is fine. But two things is one is this issue is going on in a lot of places, but I think people have to, and that's why it's called dialogue over division. You have to have dialogue. The division is fine, but I find like I'm blocking people way more than I ever would want to, but there's so many assholes out there and just people that are there's no point to have a conversation. So I don't know why you were blocked by these people, but maybe they're like, well, there's no having a conversation, this person, they're just a provocateur and it's easy to block people. I don't know. Again, I don't know and I don't think that's great, but I've certainly blocked a fair share of people because I'm like, this is just tiring. Like I'd way rather have a conversation like this. I actually don't often get involved in like an exchange on Twitter. I put my thoughts out and then I will have a bit of a conversation with some people, but I just don't find, because like you said, with a text, you can misunderstand what people are saying. And then there's these crazy Twitter battles. And like, I'm just not putting my effort and time into that. I would way rather have a conversation like this, get to know somebody, exchange ideas, get a little heated, and then, see how we can move forward from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess my kind of final thought is, since the rise of Pierre Poilievre leading the Conservative Party, I did a sort of mini podcast series called Controlled Opposition. And it kind of, the thesis is maybe the people who are pretending to be our friend, maybe instead of like the left wing and Trudeau being like the worst possible enemy, maybe it's actually the people pretending to be our friend and pretending to fight for us and who are actually gatekeeping, real right-wing voices. Maybe they're actually a bigger part of the problem, or like something that needs to be addressed, right?
Yeah, and the reason I'm laughing is because I've been called controlled opposition, or people that I'm very close to have as well. And it's like, and that's where I also think like we just start having these thoughts and ideas, and I'm like, okay, I'm not controlled. Like maybe I don't agree with everything you're doing, but it just doesn't make me a controlled opposition. And so that's why, and
for sure. And
emotion. So that's maybe the other thing that I'm like, great, there's problems, there's controlled oppositions. That's not where I dedicate time. I look forward and how I can solve the problem. Maybe that's the other difference. I don't know.
No, absolutely. No, I'm all about solving the problem. And I try to educate people and show them heuristics. Like, is this person punching towards Ottawa? Are they punching towards like the people who have more institutional power? Are they trying to, disrupt the status quo? Good. If they start to, punch away towards like the smaller peons or like the independent journalists or like the PPC, it's like, well, is that something we should be focusing on? It might be a valid criticism, but it's like, let's keep our eye on the target here, right?
I guess one last question for you too, because a big concern or like criticism of PPC is that they criticize the Conservative Party more than they do the party in government. And that's something I've said so many times too. Like, I'm about criticizing whoever's making the current decisions. And if that will be Pierre in the future, I'll be criticizing those decisions. But do you believe that's a fair criticism? If so, why? And if not, why?
I think that there's a lot of people already criticizing the Liberal Party and the ruling government to the point where it's almost become like, well, Trudeau's gone now, but like by the end of that, kind of crapping on Trudeau and how he's corrupt, that was really beating a dead horse, I thought. And I think there's a lot more ground and sort of, I think it is more effective to criticize the fakeness of Poilievre and the Conservative Party. It upsets people; they don't like it, but it's like, this could be the future prime minister. This could be the future prime minister. And he's promoting multiculturalism and post-nationalism, just like Justin Trudeau did. He said our nationalism is not based on background, birthplace, or bloodline. It's like, well, what is our nation based on? Anyone from anywhere can do anything. It's like, this is a problem we should be talking about. So I think it's valuable. And I think they should. It makes sense for the PPC to focus their criticism on the Conservative Party. The only exception to that is if the Conservative Party is not criticizing the liberals properly, then that's another thing that the PPC should try to do better of
Yeah.
condemning, and like using Convoy as an example, because Polyev will say, oh, he won't go into the vaccine injuries. He won't go into the political prisoners that happened since the trucker convoy, whereas PPC people might do that more directly.
Well, the one thing too, though, is that you said that it's been beaten like a dead horse about Trudeau and the Liberal Party. I wouldn't agree there, because they might win the election. So clearly, all of their incompetence and corruption isn't beaten into the regular understanding of Canadians.
This is a really important topic, actually, or an important perspective that people need to understand. People like us, sorry to say, we're in an echo chamber. We only reach so many people. And it's people who get their news or information online. Those people are generally more engaged. They're generally more deeper into the weeds. They're generally more educated on these topics. And we can beat on Trudeau all we want. It's not going to make it that far out of our echo chamber, though. It's probably not going to make it that far. Whereas, once again, the person with the biggest megaphone right now to really criticize Trudeau properly is Pierre Poilievre. And that was my whole complaint. He's using his megaphone to say axe the tax instead of you threw peaceful protesters in jail. That is, to me, that's such a sort of mistake or sort of missed opportunity. And it's not to say that people like us are powerless. We certainly do have a platform. It certainly does make a difference. But this idea that we're going to reach centrists, normie leftists who are watching CBC, it's I'm sorry, we're kind of just in the same echo chamber. And that's why I really advocate for right-wing or more conservative people who are in the Conservative Party influence sphere. I try to tell them, you can really be effective by criticizing Pierre Poilievre, because all the people in this sphere will listen to you, and you can help apply pressure to the Conservative Party, which will then make the Conservative Party do the right thing. And this is the thing. People say, oh my God, you don't want the Conservative Party to win. You don't want the Conservative Party to win. You might as well just be supporting the Liberals. And it's I actually don't agree with their strategy. And I think we've seen that they lost so many points in the polls. And I think it's because they reduced their whole message down to just, basic fiscal conservatism. I feel like they should have made it about something more. They should have made something more bold and strong and actually patriotic and talking about the transgenderism in schools, for example. That's kind of where I'm coming from. It's I want Poilievre to win. I don't know if his strategy is the best approach to even winning. I'm not going to pretend to support this guy who I think has a bad strategy that is not even disrupting the status quo conversation, keeping us in that liberal moral frame.
One question I asked you earlier, and we didn't talk about, I think, was kind of and I hate to use this term, but nanny state. And I think Canadians are more like that. So do you think that is not, and one part of it is how many government people in Canada are employed by the government, be it federal or provincial. And that's a big component. So when you have somebody that is kind of disrupting so much, is that something you think should be factored into the conversation?
I think that repeating statements like this, it almost becomes this mantra and this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think we should be very wary of that sort of thing.
Which thing?
We live in a nanny state. Everybody in Canada is a liberal.
No, that's not at all what I was trying to say. So let me be more clear. Is that I think it's 40% of Canadians work for the government, I think is the truth. Mm-hmm. So it's not that it's a nanny state, but they're the ones that are more cautious and scared and want to make sure that their lives aren't disrupted, because if there's a big change to the government and all of their jobs, and then they act out of fear.
Sure. The reason I'm sort of not rejecting this, but it's it feels like you're asking, hey, don't we have to be compliant and submissive to the bureaucratic class because they're growing and Like they have a growing
No,
influence?
the question, no, it's not should we be compliant, but does that affect how you present your message? Should that be, if you want to win, when a 40% of Canadians work for the government? Or do you just like go right out and say, look, your jobs are like we don't need them. You're not helping Canada. We need to get rid of them. And I don't know if I hear the PPC actually saying so much about cutting bureaucracy. Again, I don't know your whole the platform as much. Clearly, apparently,
they definitely do. But
okay.
So let's use the convoy as an example. You know, we were led to believe by the bureaucratic state, by the mainstream media, that it's a fringe minority and that the opposing mandates is completely absurd and you're inhuman and blah blah blah, horrible for doing it. Then enough people got together to protest in Ottawa for 3 weeks to say, hey, bureaucracy, go F yourselves. We're going to reverse these mandates, actually. And so when we get caught up in all of the focus groups, you know, we stay inside the Ottawa bubble and the Ottawa way of thinking of things. And, you know, there's this pragmatism. And I get it, being pragmatic, you got to be pragmatic at some point. You got to be strategic at some point. But I feel like when you get so much caught up in that, it's like you completely lose track of your convictions and what actually needs to be said. And I like to use the example of mass immigration, which there was a study, National Post did a report on it. I think it was 65% of Canadians want less immigrants, and nearly half of people support deportations. So it's like, well, so why isn't Poilievre talking about this more often then? Like, if the stats are there, right? And it's just very interesting because, you know, we'll make all of these excuses as to why we can't say this or why we can't say that. And then Poilievre will say he wants direct flights to Amritsar, India. Or he'll say, I think Israel bombing Iran would be a gift to humanity, but he can't talk about mass immigration. It's like, it's just kind of wild what he will boldly say. And it really feels like it's for like certain interests in the background. But when it comes to like really fighting for the interests of Canadians, it's like, oh, well, what about the bureaucratic class? And the reason I sort of like not reject it, but the reason why I always push back against this is like, again, so we're just going to be submissive in this liberal framework and try to win. It's like we've already lost if we're just going to try to exist in this liberal framework of being compliant or agreeing with bureaucrats, the bureaucratic class.
Yeah, obviously, I like that's not what I think makes sense. It was just a question, and I think this goes more fundamentally to what I believe too is Canadians aren't really great at holding themselves to account, i.e. with their own health and wellness, and how I push that further. How are they going to hold their government to account? So when I said that, it was more Canadians, I find, react out of fear more than not. I don't find that with our American counterparts. They're a lot more, I think
out of love for their country. Yeah.
Yeah, so much, out of love, and we are shameful about our country and what it stands for. And like I said, that was my most difficult part in the book, is actually just saying what it means to be Canadian, because we've been told it's not this, it's not that. And then who was it? Was it maybe Bernier, when he was on a podcast, asked what it means to be Canadian, and he said not to be American? Somebody said that. But Canadians really need to figure out what that is. And I think at this time, it's like almost, and I think that's why we're easily guided or, misguided. Manipulated. That's the word. I had it at the tip of my tongue, because we react out of fear. And I think that's a huge problem that we have in Canada. And that's why people like us have a strong voice, because I think, like, I'm not asking for anybody to listen to me, but I think I put out like bold things, not always, sometimes, yeah. I want to be able not to push more people away. I already took such a huge stance, like I told you, and I continue to push people, but I want to do it respectfully and not placating. I think there's a huge difference. I have people constantly reporting me to the Law Society of Alberta, and it's like, I can't even say things, but so far it's all been okay. So anyway.
That was a beautiful message, and I think you're absolutely right. I've actually never summarized it so well. Canadians are more fearful, and that is part of the phenomenon going on here. And I think that speaks to why I think disrupting the conversation is the status quo is so important, and why even like the results of the election, it's like feels like Canada is up for grabs right now. And what I mean by that is it took a 2 to 3 week media cycle and some photo ops and some stories about unmarked graves for the entire country to believe that we are a genocidal state. It took like 3 weeks of propaganda just for the entire country to be like, yep, genocide is just part of who we are, and that's like fundamental to what defines us. And it's like, it almost seems like we are so derooted from the history of our country that it's just like up for grabs, like I said. And this is why a lot of what I advocate for, I think, boils down to just being courageous, being brave, standing to your convictions, because with that notion of it being up for grabs, it's like by making these bold statements, crusading against transgenderism in school, for example, peacefully, or whatever other topic that's important, this can change people's minds. This can change the mind of a bureaucrat who might be like, you know what, this guy actually makes sense, and maybe I'm going to change my mind here. And I really reject this idea, and I'm not saying that a lot of people say this. Oh, well, Trudeau or Canada is just like more liberal, and like we can't do anything about it. And it's like that just kind of starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy if we just sort of accept that. Because if you look across Western nations, there's been seismic shifts of things like swaying left or right throughout history. And it starts with leaders. It starts with the psychological, hey, I follow that person. They have conviction. I'm going to follow them. I agree with them. And that's what it's going to take.
Being liberal.
And sorry, notice how that has nothing to do with focus groups either, right?
Yeah, I just kind of talk out of what I believe in. I don't look at focus groups at all. But there's one thing, Canada could be more liberal, but what we are seeing now, same with when we talked about what it means to be conservative, what it means to be liberal is very different. There's extreme radical ideology that is being painted as liberal, called out, and that's a bit silly as well. I don't think that's what most Canadians are comfortable with either.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, and that's why I'm a broken record. But we gotta keep pushing Polyev to speak out against that. Like we got rid of Trudeau. People think we got rid of the woke. It's like actually, a lot of our institutions, a lot of the corporate culture is now successfully woke. You might lose your job for voicing the wrong conservative viewpoint at work. That's a huge problem that needs to be addressed. And it kind of almost like flies under the radar of all these political conversations we're having, where it's like, if you're conservative, you can't even speak freely.
Well, and that's where I'm with you. And so we're both broken records. I am trying to get people to not be fearful to talk. And so some people will not be as brave as you to start with, but they have to be eased into it. I tell people this isn't about politics. If that's such a dirty word nowadays and you're not allowed to talk about it at work, we need to change that conversation. It's our civic responsibility in a democracy to speak about these things. Otherwise, we're not living in a healthy democracy. So we have to have that ability to talk to each other. And sorry, I'm going to do it respectfully. And whether you like it or not, Greg, I'm going to keep doing it respectfully.
No, and I love that. And to be clear too, like, I don't want people to misinterpret me of like, hey, I'm going to be like Greg, I'm going to be more courageous. And I'm going to go to work tomorrow and say that, transgender people are like mentally ill men and like scream it in the break room. It's like, maybe don't do that. You do need to be strategic in this environment. But once again, it's not the job of a regular conservative-minded Canadian to like solve this problem. Once again, it is our leaders. It is our conservative leaders.
I don't agree with you. That's where we disagree, because I think the power is with the people. And if the people were more effective, then the leader would be saying it, because they're followers. They're not leaders right now. They follow the polls. So make your voice stronger and better and more sophisticated, and they will follow you. They will listen to you.
Sure,
So
but
that's where
right.
I think that we could be more effective as people. People have the power. And I think it was JD Vance that said this in a podcast, is of course people are afraid of money. Money is a big driver, but they're more afraid of organized grassroots. And the Freedom Convoy was something amazing and special, and it scared all of them. And then it just went.
Sure, sure. It does start with the people, but I guess just to clarify, it's like the people should be, once again, applying pressure in the right direction to try and get their leader to spout the right talking points.
But yours
because some guy in the break room is not going to start a revolution. Actually, if you're Billboard Chris, maybe you will. But
yeah, your leader is the PPC, so you push that message. That's the thing. Like, I think that's where the strength is, through the people in the party and getting their message across. Like, raise that vibrational level as high as possible, and then CPC comes to you. And maybe that is what basically what you've been saying for the last hour and a half. But for
Right.
me, like, I'm trying to make my message as strong as possible. People understand my views. And again, I think that's why it's resonating with people. That's why my voice grows, not because I'm asking for any of it. And then people will hear it and they identify with it. So that's maybe what I would suggest after this hour and a half conversation, if you care at all, is raise the frequency of the PPC. And then I think that's exactly what you're trying to accomplish at the end of the day anyway, is to get people to come to you, right?
Yeah, you catch more with honey than with vinegar.
Well, it's just like, people then understand your message, identify with your message, because you're saying that you don't agree with what the Conservative Pierre is doing with the Conservative Party. Great, forget about them. Show through the PPC how much better you are. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to do as an individual.
Yeah. And what you're alluding to here is, instead of saying, "Hey, I don't want that," saying, "Well, what do you want?" Advocate for something
and show
stronger.
it. Show what it is you are, and who you are, and what you want, and how it would be better.
Yeah, and there is sort of like a daisy chain there where it's like, Carney's bad, and then Poilievre's like, "Vote for me because Carney's bad," and then Bernier is like, "Hey, vote for me because Poilievre is bad," and it's like, well, maybe we should advocate positively for something to get behind.
And that's what I'm all about. So I'm glad it took us 2 hours to figure that out.
Good stuff.
But that was really great, and the sun is like coming on and off of me. That was a really great conversation, Greg. I'm glad you chirped me a little bit, and then we were able to have a discussion, because I think these things are important. Educate and elevate. That's my motto.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron. I think there needs to be, in a way, more conflict and more disagreement and more debate among the right wing, because I think positive things come out of that. And we shouldn't be afraid of it, because like part of the problem in the country is everyone's like, "Oh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers. Oh, I don't want the confrontation of disagreeing." And it's like, if we truly want to change that, the people who see that as a problem, i.e. people who are more on the right wing or whatever, we need to start doing that amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that'll trickle out into the rest of the country through the high vibrations.
Yes, exactly. Lead by example. So there we go. Awesome, Greg. That was so great. We had a bit of technical difficulties, but thanks for figuring that out. And again, let's just keep the conversation going and growing.
All right. And we'll hit end.
Sounds great.